Now, by now you should already know that having a case like this right in front of the video, we're going to do something interesting, right? So right here, this is the ANTEC AX61 Elite case, which is quite interesting. First of all, because we have four 120mm ARGB fans that are right here, we're going to check the connection because on the past reviews that I did with the ANTEC cases, you constantly leave comments such as, is it connected with SATA Molex, or is it possible to connect it directly to your motherboard? So stay tuned, because during the video I'm going to mention that, so you know if this case can support it. What I can see right here is that we have SATA power, so it might be that it's powered directly through the power supply, but also there is a possibility, if you by any chance have a connection at the back, to connect it directly to a motherboard, but we'll get to that part. Now, this case is quite interesting, I do have to say, and not because I do reviews of loads of ANTEC cases and their products and stuff like that, but because it's a smaller case and you already get 4 120 fans and you can add 4 more, so 8 120mm fans. Now you would think, where do they go? So basically, you might already presume you can place 2 on the power supply shroud and you can place 2 on top. There's also a possibility to place a 360 radiator on front, which you do either have to remove these fans, basically just untie the screws to be able to use the same fans, or if you decide to go, for instance, like Vortex 360 that already has addressable RGB fans, well, then you will most likely remove these and place the addressable RGB from Vortex, the Fusion ones. So for what I can see is that it can support ITX, Micro ATX and ATX motherboards, and for this scenario I'm going to use Micro ATX just because all of my ATX boards are used up, so don't get me wrong, it can fit without a problem, and you have a nice opening here for 24-pin cable, so it really does fit, but I'm going to use Micro ATX just because, well, that's the board that I have left free and going to use it for this one. Now there's also a possibility to place two 2.5-inch SSDs, and in the middle you have a hole to reroute the cables through it and push it at the back, and give you a possibility to reroute those cables, SATA power and data, directly to your motherboard and power supply for nice cable management. But what I can say is, if you could still place them if you go with a 360 on front, but there's another option. You could go with 240 at the top, but there's a restriction because the height of the rams can be up to maximum 33 millimeters. So yeah, it kind of is tighter spot here to place a radiator at the top. But what I can say is, when you remove the magnetic dust filter, you can see that the holes for 240 are a bit moved to the front, which gives you some space to wiggle around. We'll go into that scenario definitely, because I'm going to place a 240 Vortex right here, going to try at least. If not, going to go with Frigus Air 400, but we'll get to that part later on. Now the top is also quite solid, I would say. Power on button, reset button, which basically can be used for fans to adjusting the RGB. Then you have two USB 2.0, one USB 3.0 and two 3.5mm jacks. One is for a microphone and one is for your headset. Fully ventilated power supply shroud. As already stated, you can place two 120 fans, and at the back, well, basically, let's go at the back. So we have two thumb screws. On the front, we have a tempered glass which has 4 thumb screws, so it's not designed as other ANTEC cases that have tempered glass. You do need to be very careful while removing it. And here we go, removing the backside panel, which brings us to the scenario where we have definitely limited space. And the good thing, comparing other cases such as this one, when we're talking about the size, is that you actually have an opening here for EPS cable, and this is really good because you can reroute it somewhere here and tie it up with zip ties on these extenders to make it nice, because we have centimeter and maybe a half when you place basically this side panel, because it isn't strictly on the chassis. It's a bit, you have some wiggle space still. Now we have loads of cables running here, and we have to check these to see the fans and how they connect and all the other stuff. So when we're talking about the connections right here, you can connect it with SATA. You have to connect it to SATA to give you power. But then again, here the last fan has the 3-pin 5 volts addressable RGB header. And honestly, I missed it, but you can untie it and connect it to your motherboard. But what is important is this SATA power connection right here. So this is what connects the back fan to the front fans, and they need to be connected constantly, otherwise one of these won't work. So yeah, but you can control the lights through the 3-pin 5 volts addressable RGB header from the last rear fan directly connected to a motherboard, which is good. The bottom part, what I can see is you can fit the Neo Echo NE850GM without a problem. You have a hard drive bay which can accommodate either two 3.5 inch, one 3.5 inch and one 2.5 inch, or well, basically there is no caddy for the interior part, so that's the only solution that you can go with. At the back, no space for SSDs, only here on the side, and that's basically it. Also, finally, I have to mention the front panel, which looks outstanding. I really like how they managed to place the 3 fans on front so they look equally and easy visible when they turn on and stuff like that. The design is quite cool, and I really like it. ANTEC logo right here on the side, and it's really subtle, I do have to say. So the plastic is somewhat matte finish, and then you have gloss ANTEC right here on the side. Let's build it. At first it got me worried. I do have to admit, I was a bit worried when I was placing everything inside, and the best part about everything is everything fits quite nicely. So what we have right here is the ANTEC Vortex 240 addressable RGB placed on top, and you do have limitations when it comes to RAM clearance. So I placed Team Group T Create Expert DDR5. As already stated, M80X motherboard with AMD Ryzen 5 7600X, which has interesting results. And right here we have the Sapphire Radeon RX 7900 XT Pulse. So what got me worried? First was the RAM clearance, because the standard, for instance, I tried placing the Kingston Fury Renegade RGB, which doesn't fit at all, so don't go there. You really need a low profile RAMs to fit inside. If you're going with a 240 at the top, you could squeeze a 360 on front, but then you'll have to sacrifice the length of the GPU, and that's it. Now, when we're talking about the fans, of course we have the addressable RGB connection, and as you can see, everything is perfectly in sync. But what got me really worried is when the first initial boot started, the fans were running absolutely crazy. So what happened at that point? I went to BIOS, of course, to check out everything. Unfortunately, as I already stated, the front 120 and the rear 120 don't have any possibility to adjust the speeds. So I was thinking it's either them or the fans on the AIO. So what I did is logical, placed 2 fingers and stopped the ones on the AIO, which of course nothing will happen, so no need to worry about that. But I came to a conclusion that the front 120 and the rear 120 didn't create any additional noise, and that was really outstanding because they're really quiet. And that's really good when we're talking about the fans that are connected directly to SATA power. And yeah, the only solution was go to BIOS, adjust the speed and RPMs to the curve of the CPU temperature right on these fans, and basically I'm quite satisfied. I'm really satisfied. So what I did is I packed inside the ANTEC Neo Echo NE850GM. We have the Vortex 240 on top, cooling down the 7600X, and we have the stock fans. Outstanding, right? So here are the results. AIDA 64 Extreme Edition, CPU 88 degrees Celsius, going up to 5400 megahertz, which is outstanding. Then we go to GPU 60 degrees Celsius, which is wow. And I do have to mention that the speed constantly on the AIO was 1000 RPM, so I didn't pump them up to 100%. I left them at 1000 because that's somewhere ideal getting quiet performance and everything. So, but here comes the interesting part, okay guys? We have a comparison right now, 360 against 240 in different chassis and all the other stuff. Clocks, temperature in Cinebench R23 with the Vortex 240 went up to 88, with the 360, 84. Clock speed with the Vortex 240, 5275, while the clock speed with 360 radiator got 5325. So 240 isn't cooling it as much as the 360, but we go to the score. So the scores are outstanding, because scores in Cinebench R23 start from 14,895 and the maximum that goes up to is 14,948. While the score with 360 radiator, it starts with 14,683 and the maximum that it goes is 14,917. So what we can conclude right here is that this case has an outstanding airflow. The 240 really does cool quite nicely and really does get enough intake air from the front to the top, and the rear fan does its job by pushing air outside. I mean, you can't control, that's the only downside, you can't control the speeds of the stock fans, but you can adjust the RGB through your motherboard software or through the button on top. They are silent, even though they are fixed RPMs. You can squeeze a 240, but you have to think of the RAM clearance and the VRM passive heatsink and the I/O cover as well, but you'll manage that somehow. It doesn't that interact too much with it, but the RAM is most important. And the cable management, you'll just have to do it properly this time, because there are no shortcuts when we're talking about cable management in this case. But all in all, if you're really looking for a budget case that looks quite nice, has a nice intake front meshed panel, which is really good, you already have a solution with 4 120 fans inside, pre-built inside the case. Great. Longer GPUs, wow, great as well. 240, 360, it really doesn't matter, it's all up to you to decide. The only thing that if you go with a 360 in front, you'll have to sacrifice the length of the GPU, and that'll be all. I mean, the results show quite outstanding thermals on the, well, quite outstanding performance when it comes to Cinebench R23 on the CPU, and quite outstanding thermals on the GPU. So, thumbs up. Best Buy from ANTEC, again, PC Crazy Best Buy badge without a doubt for the ANTEC AX61 Elite. I'll put the link below for the Vortex 240 addressable RGB, Neo Echo NE 850 GM, and of course finally the ANTEC AX61 Elite, so you can check out the prices and all the other details. That'll be all for today. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button and notification bell, and one more thing, sorry for my voice. See you next time guys, with a better voice and more cool stuff. Thanks for watching, bye bye.